Initially, the club provided a place for women at a time when women's place was difficult, much more difficult than it is today, where women really didn't have a place, a public place. So this was a bridge, I think, in lots of ways. It was a public place that was private, women could come to. And the actual initial establishment happened just post women getting the vote in Queensland. I guess I personally have very mixed feelings about Margaret Ogg because I find it really, really hard to identify with her. I think basically because she was such a multi-talented person and also probably an extremely private person. And that's characterised by the fact that she never became the president. She always operated at a different level on the committee. She was an articulate speaker, a consummate writer, a good musician, and she obviously was extremely focused on her agenda for women's rights and women's issues. Margaret Ogg, as she aged, became very friendly with a much younger man, Ernest Briggs, who I think was the music critic on one of the papers and actually worked for a radio station. And they obviously developed an incredible rapport with each other. In fact, he nursed her as she died. He wrote this play, The Old Battle Axe, about her, which is a really interesting play. And I've always puzzled over the relationship and have come to the conclusion that it was probably totally platonic. Her father said, you've got to know literature, you've got to know music, you've got to be widely read, you've got to be articulate. So his education for her, and I imagine it was done at home, was a pretty classical education. The bread and butter of the money that was made at the club was done through the sale of cigarettes and through the lending of library books. So the two prongs, I think, of where women were at, women wanted education, so they were hungry for those books and they continued to borrow them and pay for them, and women who wanted to smoke couldn't do so publicly, so the club provided them a nice little place where they could smoke, and they sold the cigarettes and made money out of it. And Match of the Minute book that you can read back just shows the arguments between the smokers and the non-smokers, and where people were allowed to smoke, where people weren't allowed to smoke, where they could put their butts, and when they couldn't put their butts, they definitely couldn't smoke in any of the toilets. People like to look back and look at the enormous wealth of achievements that the club had, particularly in the area of political equality for women, and they seem to think it's all been done, but the club today, I think, has huge potential, apart from its philanthropic works, which it assiduously continues through bursaries and through supporting various charities. There is this huge potential for a place of meeting, support, friendship for women, that in a fast-moving world, such a psychological haven has incredible potential.